Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video I thought I'd give the horror movies a rest for a change while we look at 5 horrifying moments in non-horror films. So yeah, sometimes other movies can be shocking and scary and disturbing as well, and we're going to look at 5 of those instances in this video. Now, a couple of these choices I think you'll definitely agree with, some you might laugh at, some you might even mock me for, but I'm just being honest in this one. This is some non-horror films that have always stayed with me for either scaring me or disturbing me, so we'll get straight into it. So this is 5 horrifying moments in non-horror films. First movie on the list is Casino from 1995. Martin Scorsese's epic depiction of mob and organised crime in the Las Vegas setting. And this scene involves the death of a character, so spoiler alert, although this is from 1995. And the scene in question is the death of Nicky, played by Joe Pesci. Now this is a character who is a really nasty guy. He does some unpleasant things to people throughout the whole film. But even with that in mind, his death is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in cinema. Him and his brother meet who they think are their friends and business associates in the middle of a cornfield. A bit of a red flag right there. And within moments of meeting them, they are savagely beaten to near death with baseball bats in a scene that just goes on forever and is brutal and unflinching. Like, you'll be watching this and wincing throughout the whole thing. So they're beaten to near death with these baseball bats and then unceremoniously buried while still alive in this shallow grave. And my goodness, it is just one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. I'm even surprised this one made it into the movie. I know Martin Scorsese must have a lot of sway in Hollywood, but how this scene got passed in its presentation is just a miracle. But when I think of shocking deaths, I mean, there's things like Cannibal Holocaust, which is right up there, but up there with that is Casino, in one of the most violent and horrible scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And Martin Scorsese does something which is really clever, and again, bit of a spoiler alert, but the scene is actually narrated by Joe Pesci's character, so you kind of subliminally get this expectation that he's kind of still around and he's recounting what happened. But as soon as he's hit with the first bat, the narration stops abruptly. I just always found that to be genius filmmaking by Martin Scorsese. But oh my goodness, yeah, this is one of the most horrible things I've ever seen in a movie, horror film or not. So first movie on the list is Casino. The next movie on the list is Come and See from 1985. One of the most soul-destroyingly disturbing movies you will ever see. This is an anti-war movie that is not a kind of action-packed war film, but rather a disquieting exploration of how small towns and communities were affected and destroyed by Nazi infiltration. And we follow a couple of characters that go from kind of young and idyllic people to just war-ravaged shells of their former self. But the scene in question towards the end is the barn burning scene, where the Nazis rally together a bunch of men, women, children, babies, and herd them into these barns, and then in a gleeful frenzy set fire to them, killing everyone inside. And again, it's one of the most shocking and disturbing things you'll ever see. Heartbreakingly realistic and just awful to watch. Even down to scenes of the barn doors and the windows being banged on as the flames engulf everybody inside. But my goodness, I mean, this scene will destroy you for some period of time. It's that hard to watch and that disturbing. And again, in terms of kind of like disturbing horror movies, for me, you've got things like Martyrs, Salo, but right up there with those is Come and See, as being one of the most disturbing things that I've ever seen. I need to get the Criterion Blu-ray because I have no qualms adding this war film into the horror collection, because this is true horror. So next movie on the list is Come and See. Next up we have The Deer Hunter from 1978. Michael Cimino's Vietnam character study, where we follow a group of steel workers and we follow the horrifying before and after effects of the Vietnam War on these characters. And I was always expecting more of an action-packed war film from The Deer Hunter, maybe something more akin to Platoon, with perhaps elements of Apocalypse Now. What I was not expecting was the real kind of traumatic exploration of how these men are affected and ultimately destroyed by their harrowing experiences in the Vietnam War. Most notably the frankly terrifying Russian roulette scene, where Robert De Niro and his soldier friends are captured, kept in awful conditions, and then forced by the Viet Cong to play Russian roulette. And again, just an absolutely terrifying scene. I mean, you can literally see the characters lose their mind over the course of this act in the movie. Robert De Niro goes for a more kind of gung-ho, stick-it-to-him approach. John Savage is really hard to watch. He's just like genuinely terrified. And then maybe most chilling of all, Christopher Walken, whose sort of just soul leaves him as the scene goes on and just becomes a ghost of his former self. Apparently Christopher Walken lived on nothing but rice during the making of The Deer Hunter in order to achieve that gaunt appearance. But I challenge anyone not to watch The Deer Hunter and be on absolute tenterhooks whilst you're watching the Russian roulette scene, and not just be engulfed by emotions of fear and terror and sadness as these characters are just put through this awful thing. Such a powerful movie. Definitely not the kind of film they make now, that's for sure. So next movie on the list is The Deer Hunter. Next movie on the list, and here's where you might laugh at me, but I can't remember too many things from childhood which are seared into my memory due to being so traumatically scary. And with that in mind, the next movie on the list is Pinocchio from 1940, and in particular the donkey transformation scene. And Pinocchio and a bunch of naughty boys are sent to Pleasure Island by this unscrupulous guy. And at Pleasure Island, they can do whatever they want. They can drink as much as they want, smoke as much as they want, vandalize the place, which they do all this in abundance. But it comes at a price. It comes at a terrifying price. And all the boys there suddenly and terrifyingly just start to turn into donkeys, almost like American Werewolf style. It looks painful and it looks horrible, and their fear is palpable in this animated movie. And Disney, they were not holding back any punches. They were out to scare you with this scene. I can still vividly remember the shot of the boy's hands turning into donkey hooves as he screams for his mum. It's like, wow, Disney, you were going for it here. And these once little boys, now donkeys, are kind of thrown into this pit, and it's suggested that they're sent off to work in salt mines. Just a horrifying concept. And in this one moment, Disney managed to throw out cruelty towards children and animals in one unsuspecting and terrifying unfolding of the plot. And it's always stayed with me. It is just a stark, scary, vivid, horrible looking transformation that just has some terrifying notions to it. And although I haven't seen Pinocchio for years and years, I don't think I'll ever forget that scene. So yeah, next movie on the list is Pinocchio. And the last movie on the list, and here's where I might get downright mocked, but I think it's really scary, and it's based on a true event. The last movie on the list is Titanic from 1997. Now, I'm sure a few people will scoff at this one for its romantic elements and the chick flick nature of this one. I can kind of take or leave those bits. But the actual portrayal of the sinking of the Titanic in this movie, I think, is as immersively close as you can get to being on the ship that night. It's kind of up there with Omaha Beach in Saving Private Ryan, as kind of, you know, being as close to that action as you can be. And the scene really that sticks with me in Titanic is the scene where the inside of the ship with the glass dome kind of caves in under the weight of the water, and the helpless passengers are just pelted with the water and scramble around, but you know, ultimately drown. I mean, if that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. But that whole kind of final hour of the Titanic, I think, is done remarkably well, very effective, and is downright terrifying. And you know, you can kind of pick any moment of that last sort of the ship's last stand, and you know, I challenge anyone not to say that wouldn't have been an awful moment. And yeah, like I say, the romantic and you know, the characterization parts of Titanic, I don't mind them, but in particular the disaster side of it, and just the people drowning and freezing and getting trapped, it does, you know, always gets to me when I watch Titanic. I do, you know, legitimately think it is an amazing movie, and one that yeah, just always gets to me emotionally and in terms of being scary, and just yeah, frighteningly accurate as to what it must have been like on that fateful night. So yeah, last movie on the list is Titanic. So there we go, guys. That is 5 horrifying moments from non-horror movies. Let me know what you think of my choices, and let me know of any non-horror films that you thought were particularly scary or disturbing. I'd love to know what they were. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.